grade, my dad went overboard and purchased his ideal vehicle. He bought a convertible BMW Z4. I don't recall all the details because I was too young to drive at the time. Everything about it was silver, with accents of glass and chrome. Under the hood, there was a powerful machine that was incredibly gorgeous. That is, the first year he purchased it. I wanted you to come along our road trip. A method to commemorate, strengthen relationships, and adjust to the new vehicle. He stated as much. He would give me some driving tips. It all sounded like fun. So that summer, after school let out, you took a week or so to travel after packing things. There was not much more room for clothing and supplies. In the rear seat is the trunk. Google one if you haven't seen one before. Z4s are incredibly little automobiles, but we had a great time and knew exactly where we were going because my dad and I had been winging it for a month or two roughly. And then head north first, passing across to the west, and then follow the coast highway through California. We shared memories from the good old days, spoke about life, and grooved out to music. Normal father-son interactions. We even cracked jokes and riddles. A few of my preferred activities. The majority of the stunning landscapes we visited were valleys and canyons spread across the Pacific Northwest and the Southwest. It was awesome, and I cherished every second of it. It was also enjoyable to stop. Growing up, I was overweight, so I enjoyed all the food at the gas station. We had plenty to eat. Burgers, stomach bombs, jerky, Pepsi, and chips, all of them. On other occasions, my dad would look for us when we stopped at finer motels. Better eateries for us to visit. It appeared to please us both and was a cool dichotomy. We came into a medium-sized town one evening, the name of which escapes me now. Leechbrook or Litchfield? Or something similar. We were able to secure a pleasant hotel room on one of our stays. After hitting the pool, we took a short stroll across downtown. I recall that as we were conversing, we noticed that every single woman we saw was incredibly attractive. Son, it seems as though there's something in the water out here. My father once told me, you might be hitting the road. Tomorrow is yours. Following a delightful supper, additionally to a walkabout, we decided to return to our hotel room. I could sense that something strange was occurring, correct? As soon as I noticed the location, a small group of people have gathered around a few autos. We're oddly parked. My father seems unfazed. I just kept going without saying anything about them. When cruising as well, since, technically speaking, nothing was going on, I didn't want to come across as a huge baby or anything. It was strange nevertheless. And keep in mind, when I shut the door behind me and turned the deadbolt to lock, I kept a watchful eye on that crowd. It wasn't like it was incredibly posh or something. The entire hotel was on the ground floor. It also lacked any gray of any type. A double locking system with a deadbolt was the standard security feature on hotel doors. Chain and bolt. Large observation glass next to the entrance. Over it, the drapes closed. Quite normal. After we got settled, I started munching on some peanut M&Ms. Since these were my dad's favorite road trips, this was another need. Candy. I heard the first few when we were watching Seinfeld repeats. Outside, there are shouts. Turning, I peered in, but Dad continued to watch TV. The man exuded confidence. Do you believe they are simply intoxicated outside? I have a question. Not a concern for us. Did everything fit together? I nodded, thinking that I had just picked up a very important life lesson. We were both quite tired by 9 p.m., so I decided to call it a night. We intended to leave town by 6 or 7 in the morning to stay, as the riffraff outside appeared to have calmed down. Proceed. It made sense to try to pass out given the schedule. After performing our ritual in the bathroom, we quickly went to bed. Still, I didn't go to sleep. See? No matter what's going on, my dad has this amazing ability to fall asleep in any place, at any time. You're snoring like crazy, and I can hear the noises outside growing louder once more. To make matters worse, I was the only one up and alone, which added to my worry. Being the only one with knowledge of what's truly going on outside just makes matters worse. You seemed like the typical person hosting a tailgate party. But after a while of listening in, something shifted. Voices sounded hot, not like they were yelling and grooving. Agitated. I looked at the clock constantly. The disturbance began at around 10:30. The guys started yelling at each other at 11:30. A few individuals were trying to mediate from what I could hear, but things were rapidly spiraling out of control. The snoring abruptly stopped. My dad suddenly got out of bed. After putting on his shirt, he approached the window. He hurled the blind. My eyes were wide open so that I could see his face. He maintained his flawless poker face, merely witnessing what was happening outside. Since my dad was a former Marine, we had all heard stories at family gatherings and get-togethers that, in his younger years, he had been the one to die in the bar brawl and had left town as soon as there was insufficient proof to send him to jail. "Dad, what's going on out there?" Finally, "Just a lot of drunks," was his reply. Dad, who held a particular contempt for anyone who indulged in alcohol consumption, had also been clean for a few years. The public. I'm saying that he was a tight ass. And now he was awake in the middle of the night by a group of strangers. Any fear I felt vanished in an instant. Outside, the voices became louder and louder, and my dad barely missed a beat. He put on some shorts and garlanded his shoes and made a move toward the exit. "A gun is underneath me," he said. "Pillow. Remain vigilant and refuse to let anyone in." My dad vanished into the night with that. I leaped from my bed and walked straight to the window. A large, weighty curtain, the kind that was draped in front of it. Looked like a comforter. I turned back one corner and used only one eye to peer outside. I was perfectly able to make those sounds. Listening. A small tailgate party was held earlier in the hotel's distant parking lot. It appeared that one of the trucks belonged to a road company that did something like highway maintenance. It had a large work truck decal on the side with cones and other items in the back. From the shadows, my dad came up to these people. He crept around the building's edge, hiding in difficult-to-see spots. It was only when he was virtually over them that he emerged and made himself seen. First, the crowd flinched, then turned and fell silent for a while. Dad was speaking, but I couldn't hear him because he was moving, first to the hotel room and then to his car. Everyone followed with a nod. He then bid me a good night. They generally get people to listen to them because that always gives off the cop vibe. Returning to the chamber, he slept. After inserting the key, I Saturday in bed. He remarked, "So much for a good night's sleep." He was looking at his phone. "Try to get a little more sleep, please. Now, everything ought to be okay, son." I also did. I was quite exhausted after the travel, and it was already past midnight when I finally fell asleep. Right now, the eyes were searing. I drifted off into nothingness with my dad's safety and the momentary quietness. I'm not sure how long it lasted, but a hammering on the door startled me awake what seemed like only a few seconds later. For some reason, even though my dad had told me not to open the door for anyone at the moment, I somehow thought he was still outside. It seemed like no time had passed at all, and I dozed off while he was having his first brief talk with him outside. Panicked, I leaped to my feet and ran for the door, only to feel a heavy hand rest on my shoulder. I was startled and spun around to see my dad perched on the edge of his bed. "Everybody is present here. Everyone is doing well. You gave me your word. Is it gibberish outside?" He gave off an air of assurance, but my dad could tell. Felt a bit startled. Perhaps he had been resting as well, and now he was unsure of what was in progress. Whoever was outside the door began to yell through the walls and kept beating him. "Please assist me. You must admit me." Beyond that, we could hear the room being approached by voices from earlier. Dad grabbed his revolver and went to look out the window. He didn't like what he saw. The man began beating on the window, screaming and pleading with us to open up after he saw him through the glass. The entrance. "I beg you, man, they will. Please kill me right now." "Why? How do you?" My father yelled through the window. He turned to face me, gesturing with his phone. He instructed me to give him a call. 91. Any discussion about death was a good excuse to have police present. I took his phone and dialed 911 without pressing the button since I was so foolish and self-assured as a child. I got out of bed, moved over to my dad's side, and opened the window. A tiny mob was approaching. There were folks from previously behind this guy. I didn't look at the man at the door. Really. Acknowledge him. He didn't look like the other people. I saw that emblem on his clothes because of this. It was identical to the task. Vehicle within. Section of the parking area. I pointed and said, "I think that's his truck, Dad." "What do you mean?" he inquired. As quickly as I could, I tried to express what was running through my mind. This guy was simply trying to get to his work truck when the inebriated individuals decided to trick him. I was unsure if I was truly correct, but at the moment it's kind. My dad pointed at the guy who was going to kick in our door and shout out a question, and it kind of made sense to me. "That truck out there, is that yours?" Indeed. With a sudden intake of breath, my dad unlocked the door and swung it open. He just stood in the guy's way, refusing to let him inside. He raised the pistol to eye level so that everyone outside could see it. Additionally, the man attempted to storm into the room once more, but Dad stood his ground. I just yelled above the voices and phoned the cops. That seems to rapidly grab everyone's attention. That's when I realized I never really got it down, but I assumed it was done when I saw everyone tuck their tails and get out. The guide door slid down against the outer wall and began to fill everyone in on everything. He was going to be staying a few doors away. When he returned to the motel on foot, he had been out drinking a few beers. He observed the activity around his truck immediately, having stated that he was in the city to complete the task. Nothing was on his mind taking place with his apparatus. He claimed to have made a straightforward request for them to kindly leave his car. By now, both the throng and the road worker had become inebriated. In an instant, what began as a question escalated into a shouting war. The lone man was vastly outmatched. One shove prompted another. The man was soon encircled. He claimed that although he squared up and swung his way out of the circle, he still took a severe thrashing from them. It was clear. During this, his hotel key came loose from his pocket. The scuffle simply went door to door, asking for help at the door. He was pursued by all of these individuals. That was, after all, only part of the narrative. The overnight clerk called after witnessing part of the incident from his office. Police. They arrived abruptly, much like my father. They rolled his guys into the parking lot. Even in the absence of a siren or even just headlights, anyone who hadn't already run away was gathered up. Then the true narrative surfaced. As it happened, everyone in the group had been drinking beer at a nearby tavern, including the worker on the road. They walked the streets talking trash and exchanging words until the bartender finally threw them out. They recognized the guy's truck from the hotel parking lot. After purchasing a case of beer, they practically tailgate the boys. The lone man began fighting with the group until truck arrived, only for them to have that last say once more. It was then that he realized there were no longer any bouncers to keep him safe. The next thing he knows, he's pleading for assistance at the door of a stranger. Things fell silent as the police arrived. People dispersed, and those who didn't were taken into custody and interrogated. Dad and I were spared from making an announcement. We just closed this since I wasn't the one who phoned the police. Door and turned around. The only individual who could have been arrested was in bed. That worker on the road. The following morning, his truck was still in the parking lot. He departed. I'm a nature enthusiast and an amateur photographer. This implies that I enjoy taking long exposure images of rivers, eagles soaring over lakes, moonscapes, and still lives of landscapes. Although I'm by no means an expert, I enjoy experimenting with various forms of photography. I used to be fixated on capturing these ideal images of a lightning bolt. I've seen a lot of these amazing sets of utterly bizarre photos. An ancient spider woven from a single point. A single bolt would, of course, stretch an incredible length across the frame in the stunning pictures, but only to go and fill the entire frame. These days, Facebook and Instagram are rife with these photos, which you have probably seen. What am I speaking of? I drove out to try to get one of these pictures for myself with a friend. We conducted our research after learning where many of these images were being taken. There's a season for everything in the Southwest. Phoned. Monsoon, a period of devastating rain that can last for hundreds of miles. During these periods of intense rain, thunder and lightning are produced by the cloud energy that builds up. We set up shop at Four Corners, USA, the most southern location I could have imagined. Here, the states of Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado converge in the most exquisite harmony. There's nowhere else where you can be in 4 states at once. All of that didn't concern me. I recently read on the internet that this is the best place to take pictures of lightning during the monsoon since it would enable me to chase storms into any of these states. I could end up with one of these. Fantastic. The shots I was seeking. I used to organize the vacation. Friend Owen of mine. To be honest, both of the women in the cast were yes girls who would always rather follow me. Spontaneous picture sessions. She was even more eager to go because this was the longest ride we had taken together. Cass was the standing model if I were the amateur photographer. We got on the road. A diverse range of materials. Naturally, all of my camera gear was there, along with our regular attire, but we also packed a variety of items, costumes, and accessories for the cats to play with. She enjoyed weaving mini stories into several of our picture series, which was quite artistic and distinctive. In case our finances ran out or there were no motels in the area, we also had some sporadic camping equipment. When we looked back, it was clear that we had a lofty goal. We wanted to be ready for everything. 2 young women are traveling alone, literally to the middle of nowhere, across half the nation. The math is done by you. In any case, we sailed without any problems. While we were there, the weather was pleasant. But we're in the driver's seat. And it was cruising along quite nicely. We crossed several state borders and even went to an unplanned performance that I got some rad stuff. Before we eventually get to Colorado, there is a film. The following morning, we made the final jaunt of the journey after spending the night in Trinidad. We had a magnificent journey through the southern villages of Durango and Cortez. I've driven some pretty amazing cars after that, but that was really that good. After that, we descended into the undulating badlands that join these 4 untamed states. I could see the clouds gathering in, and Cass and I couldn't have timed it better. Somewhat off in the direction of where we were going. We did it perfectly, damn it. Pass gyrated towards the windscreen. The warm, humid air that comes with the monsoon greets us as we pull down our windows. Up until the clouds are forced to release all of their moisture back into the earth below, the humidity and pressure rise. I answered, I guess it pays to do your research. Recall that we had planned this entire trip for several months, so it's not like we were utterly unprepared. We could see the clouds gathering above us into a massive, dark shape. It appeared as though there should have been a nearby volcano shooting smoke and lava in all directions, a scene from a motion picture. This, as we drew nearer, I will never forget. Electricity was palpable between Gas and me. The hairs are growing. Our legs and arms begin to straighten. Nearby, it felt like static, but it was pure cloud energy. As we got closer to the Four Corners Visitation Center, even the hair on our heads began to rise. I'm not sure how the location is typically decorated, but when we folded up, it was becoming a town of ghosts. The tourists were being forced back into their automobiles by the chilly winds and darkness, even though the rain had not yet begun. About 30 people were mingling among the same number of cars in the parking lot when we first arrived. Half of them had gone back into their cars by the time we retrieved our coats and cameras, and we were trying to get back on the highway. As well as beyond, there were still a few storms there. Spirits wandering the grounds. An occasional family here and there. A few elderly couples, as well as the renegade solos, carried cameras. Only their mobile phone. Since it was a tourist destination, there was a diverse mix of individuals there, which, to be honest, I never really paid attention to. All Corners, although having that visiting center, is a lonely place. There are only a few structures and a few stalls with sporadic information. Then there's this large concrete slab with a pattern of circles that shows you which state you are in and where the state borders are. You go through them. And there was a spot for someone to be, the dead center. In 4 states simultaneously. We thus joined the short line to have our picture taken. When we took our pictures, the storm was already fully formed, and the first drops of rain had turned into large, unavoidable ones. The few remaining individuals all hurried to the parking lot. Something shot Cass and me to our core as we laughed and tried to keep our props and camera gear dry. That massive bolt of lightning struck first, then an insane streak of lightning straight overhead. Like before, it was so close that we could feel it in the atmosphere. Right away, Cass and I threw ourselves onto my car's front seat and watched the water scatter across the windshield. That was it. This is the reason we arrived. As we took our seats in the front, we observed the row of bright red tail lights disappear into the encroaching night. Storm blacked out, yet it was only afternoon. Any indication of daybreak. It felt like it was becoming late. However, you were fired up and eager to snap some amazing pictures. And keep in mind that while we had a little snack, the heater was running non-stop to prevent the windows from fogging up. And bided their time to find out where lightning might appear. Everything appeared to be coming from Utah in the northwest, but there also appeared to be another storm approaching from the south, or what appeared to be Arizona. I remarked, maybe that's why it's getting so crazy. It appears that 2 storms are merging. Regardless, the rain was falling heavily. I was staring out my window when I noticed the hazy outline of a car across the manor. It appeared as though another person was hanging, and through the storm as well. I saw someone leap and the driver's door swung open as I was about to bring it up. Outside amid the downpour, both of us were in shock at that. Who would have the audacity to run around in such disarray? The hard dirt outside was quickly turning to mush, while lightning above seemed to be threatening to hit everyone who dared. Nevertheless, we were somewhat envious. That was precisely the kind of conduct we always aimed to imitate. A carefree demeanor. Feeling relaxed. That whole young and wild thing. Okay. We immediately began energizing one another, eager to open our doors, and just step outside into the pouring rain. That was never going to work. As much as we desired to let loose during the storm was still raging. I moved to open the door when the cast grabbed me and motioned for me to stay. Why? I inquired. She nodded out her window outside and said, "Look." A stranger's ghostly body was beginning to undress for us to witness. Our uncertainty stemmed from the driver. Was a male or a woman earlier, but it was this time. It was a male. Ripped his shirt off, twirling it around his head and letting it fall. A good 20 feet away. That's when he started to run around, actually prancing and skipping in every direction. He began to strip off more and more clothes until he was entirely nude. We stopped laughing in disgust when we saw this guy roll in the dirt and splash in the puddles. How could he get the rain into his hands? I'm not sure why, but when we watch him, we get creeped out. It felt even stranger because of the secret, as if we had front row seats to this guy's bizarre private existence. Then he began approaching the car. Though it wasn't directed at first, the movement was obvious as he got closer. Before approaching the passenger window, you circled the entire car. Cass was on, cupping his hands and looking in. on that side of the vehicle. She made her way over to the center console and slipped inside my chair. I have no idea when it began, but all of a sudden, screaming suddenly filled the car. At first, the guy just stared in disbelief. "Have fun." He waved, grinned, and began pulling on the handle. I'm really glad it was secured. Even though they were all, the guy continued to knock on doors and attempt to unlock them. Up every handle. He even gave the trunk a go. He began whooping up to the skies when that failed. I had had enough by then. I started the engine and put the car in reverse. I began making my way back toward the exit. I could only make it 5 miles per hour because of the mud, potholes, and poor view across the windshield. Or 6 miles per hour. We were still being lapped by this freak, and he was having no trouble keeping up. After approximately half a mile, he gave up. Just jogged back towards the parking lot where the storm center was and turned around. We still don't know the identity of the individual or what he was doing. He appeared to be a well-groomed white man, no older than 25. Appeared to be a typical guy. A few miles away, I found a pullout where we collected ourselves and made sure the automobile was okay, save from the issue of naked harassment. We received the "since you never followed us when we were driving" pictures that we have. Arrived and made their way back to Durango. Should you choose to? Go to Four Corners. Man, be on the lookout for that weird new rain dance. This summer, our senior year, my closest friend and I planned an epic road trip. We recently graduated after 4 years of involvement in various activities, including athletics in addition to school. Student government and after-school groups are also included. Everything. We're incredibly busy students who had an intense urge to let go of the previous year. We had also started to experience a peculiar form of FOMO. Throughout their senior year, we saw everyone having the time of their life. When the time for our arrival, then, we made a turn. All set. The only additional friend who was coming was something we hadn't planned for. Along. Jackson, the guy's name. We've had sporadic friendships for a very long time. Once, after going through this religious awakening, he had moved away and became something of a. In addition, something in his life always seems to be coming up. Those that keep him from spending time with us. But senior year, Jackson wanted to travel with us on the road trip as we were friends. At all. That summer, Jackson took off and never looked back. We're heading toward the ocean and blasting out of the Midwest. Before heading to the beach or the Colorado Pueblo ruins, we wanted to take in as much as we could. The Grand Canyon's granite formations in Utah. Even if we managed to cram. It's inside. The ultimate objective. We planned for the entire operation to take 14 days, including 6 days of just driving. The goal was to crash land any place along the coast in the Monterey area and live in beach crews as bombs for about a week. For the most part, everything was ideal at the time. That we established. Sail, the lovely weather was here. There wasn't anything stopping us, and gas was cheap. Heard some of our favorite songs, heard amusing tales, and saw the well-known aspects of our state. Things began to seem different as we drifted closer and closer to the state line. Fresh. We became ecstatic. We were so happy the first night that I don't think we ever stopped. Instead, we just took turns driving non-stop until we were well ahead of schedule and almost tired out. The following morning, we made amends, booked a hotel, and went to bed together. Never existed previously. A little more than we could chew, you bit off. Almost immediately, thus this allowed us to maintain a far more sober tone for the remainder. Of course. That's how the trip keeps things simple. Make it fun. Man, lessons to live by. The excursion proceeded almost exactly as planned. After 5 days, I find myself floating over some of the wackiest and sketchiest communities I have ever seen while traveling across inland California. One of the cities had relatives in those kinds of towns, so we had childhood recollections of visiting there. Seeing the number of homeless people in the decaying city was absurd. Apart from that, it was even more absurd to witness individuals traveling through these regions daily in this manner, as though it were completely typical. To be honest, I found it unbelievable. It resembled something from a dystopian book. We began to spot drifters as we were leaving these places, usually in the form of extremely discreet hitchhikers. We were in our youth. Reports were circulating that certain states prohibited hitchhikers for unknown reasons. That was a topic of discussion the entire drive. After witnessing such extreme poverty, something inside of me had completely collapsed. Being young, traveling, and empathetic, I wanted to give in secret. A person who hitchhikes? Travel. It sounded exciting, cool, and, of course, giving in this case. It was just one of those things I wanted to cross off my youth milestone list. Not on. As I floated it to my friends. Hi everyone. How about if we grab the next drifter we came across? I made my request for the front seat. The driver was evil, and the rear of Jackson was full. Do you not remember seeing that movie? Jackson inquired in the rear, and I asked. You know, Jackson fell, man. I'm not sure the name of it, but it is the one from which they are chosen. A hitchhiker hit her up. Uses the knife to murder everyone inside the automobile. It's known as a hitchhiker. Ever made a statement? Yes, Jackson yelped, that one. Up front, we both just chuckled. Jackson constantly attempted to draw what seemed to be clear-cut logical conclusions, yet he was never truly knowledgeable about the subjects he was discussing. Even though it was made fun of, it was always funny and made me laugh. Nobody intends to murder us. Whoa, did I ever mention that I picked up hitchhikers? Nothing ever took place. He had relatives all around, and it was his car. Thus, had a slightly wider travel experience than either of us. It's okay, do as you please. Next. Spreading out back in, Jackson remarked. Returning. Just keep in mind what I said. Said. That was when you nodded off or tried to anyway. At all. And I started searching for an ordinary-looking person to offer a ride to by walking along the road. To be honest, we drove right by a few guys who appeared to be mangy and scary. We were young. We didn't want to find ourselves in a precarious situation. We desired to take action. Not the same. Get the miles moving. A little bit and something kind for those in need. Then it was visible to us. Then we made out his presence. He was lounging off the shoulder, smoking a cigar, just a mile or two past the town limits. Fantastic. He was younger, perhaps our age, and he had a fierce appearance. I mean, brightly bleached hair that sticks out in every direction. Dyed. Skin-tight top, baggy jeans, and painted fingernails. Next to him, on the crumbling asphalt, was a duffel bag. How is that, dude? What if? I inquired. Yes, that appears to be the appropriate individual. Ever nodded as she spoke. He stopped, then got going again. To shift into the designated driving lane. The instant the passenger tire rolled over that white line, the guy ahead of me didn't even hesitate to shoulder his bag and start going over. Before you entered and had some, he didn't even bother to assess our demeanor. Justification. That informed me that he must be innocent. Would you not want if you had bad intentions? First, see who was in the automobile. It might be a group of children, police officers, motorcycle riders, or any other similarly threatening gathering of individuals. However, this child didn't even blink. Sacred. Are you telling the truth? With his legs swinging around to get behind the driver's seat or picking this person up, Jackson asks from the rear. Yes, till we get to the next one, anyway. City, I uttered. At that moment, he suddenly opened the door and entered. He positioned his backpack in between Jackson and him. Hello, I appreciate the ride. You can call me Corey Spashley. I'm glad to have met you all. That's exactly what he said. It's his actual name, too. If this individual is on social media at all, I doubt it. We introduced ourselves briefly before going around the automobile. We informed them of our origins and the purpose of our journey. He listened intently to what we said. Roy even promised to give us some advice and tips about some amazing places once we arrived at the beach. He has spent his entire life in California. When we changed topics, he introduced himself and said that he was born in San Diego, where his parents were still residing. Not to mention circling for almost 5 years at this point. After quitting school, he spent 6 months touring with various bands. State. Sleeping, couch surfing, and burned out parking structures. It was at that point that you were addicted to drugs and time truly began to fly by. After you moved out on the road, you tried cleaning yourself up each time you returned home. Called him frequently. Troy was on his way to visit a friend at the moment. He discovered was within. For a wanderer like this, going to the hospital felt like a noble endeavor. Would it be okay if I smoked here? He inquired. Eva glanced in my direction. I had no say in the matter because it was his car. From the back, Jackson observed, "There's no ashtray," with the voice of logic. "Oh, you're not done with this yet?" Shaking an empty bottle of Coke, Croy inquired. I decided to just invite him to come in here. Man never ventured, none of us smoked. "Come on, man," yelled Croy. They were all quite taken aback. I'll lower the window. Dude, I was smoking a cigarette when you pulled over and scooped me up. Practically in front of you. I smoked while busting my balls, as you guys were aware. Oh no. He then lowered the window and turned on the smoke. Ever shrugged a little bit. To be honest, it's not like the person did raise a valid issue. The vehicle was new or anything at all. Troy therefore chose to smoke when he wanted to. For the remainder of the afternoon. When you picked him up, it was either noon or 7 p.m. in the next city. But long before then, we drove through another little hamlet with around 50 dwellings strewn across the soil, a restaurant, and a gas station. There was also this lovely old hotel, but it was strange. For an unknown purpose. I was just given the creeps by that. I could recall it. Had Red felt the carpet like a large patio outside the room? The walkway was very old and unsettling. We merely stopped here for a short while to get a little. We take a deep breath and extend our limbs. While filling up the gas, Jackson is inside having a and keeps going around in circles in an attempt to relax. On his knees. Although Roy might have been chatting to us, he remained in the car and talked to himself. We simply never heard it. And we completed our petrol purchase. Jackson had just got back from the restroom. Thus, we all did for a while. Flip-flopping. Eva and I went inside. Jackson was now returning to the vehicle. We both wanted to grab something to drink and both needed to urinate. Thus, once we had completed our tasks, we both returned to the car. As soon as we stepped outdoors, we heard a yelling. It takes us several minutes to notice that they match. It originates with us. Vehicle. We dash over to check out the back. The passenger door is open. Jackson was standing over Croy, yelling at him while he remained seated. "Hey, what's going on?" I inquired. Jackson held up his arm to me and said, "Pinch me, dude." Although at first, I wanted to laugh, I was surprised to see a large red raspberry on the inside of his arm. I turned around and glanced at the person who seemed somewhat interested. "Take charge of this." Whatever he said, I looked up to him the entire time, treating him like an elder brother. "Most likely, I was going to accompany you. Has anyone ever asked why you would do that?" "Please, I was only..." "Boy, I'm messing with them." I gave him a pinch as he leaned against the window. I assumed I would. Gave him the biggest scare. "Is that how you define A?" I asked in jest. "Yes, tell me his reaction." Subsequently, he burst into uncontrollable laughter, lit up another cigarette, shut his door, and gestured for us to enter. We three turned to face one another. Jackson answered, "I'm not riding with him. I do not wish to abandon him here. At all." I said, "Let's just drop him off in the city. You'll probably be ready to go before we do even came to an end. He and I will sit in the back." I presented to Jackson. You shape it over with a downward glance, shrug, and slide into the passenger seat. Do you guys still recall what I said? Remember? Yes, inquired. With a nod, we both entered the vehicle. Is it because I made a small change that startled you all? Boy, I sat down beside him and asked. All he wants is more space. He is. More than I was, I clarified. I simply talked to Coy for the next several minutes, actually getting into a conversation with them. We first discussed politics and the time, and we only just managed to escape the parking lot this time around. This was more than just the impression I wanted to give a hitchhiker. Just have a wild conversation. Spend time together. Whatever. As I share part of my with him. Dark matter theories. Croy does a double take out the window while I watch. We're about to turn back onto the tiny junction. Cross state. Another hitchhiker is there, holding the sign, along with a dog. Everything he owned. I thought the throng might throw the offer of a little cash out the window. Anything to help and encourage a fellow wanderer, isn't that right? Rather, I witnessed Crone's hand accidentally slipping around his Coke bottle. The final tray before he had to jump out of the path to throw it as hard as he could to the guy by the road. Refrain from being crushed by it. Then, just for being there, Troy leans out the window and yells obscenities at the man and his dog. And what on earth is all that? Roughly. I questioned him. As soon as he fell back into his feet. We're moving quickly to get off this scene and onto the freeway. How do I keep an eye out for these punks when driving? It's a dog-eat-dog and everybody, man, is trying to harm you, he clarified. I said, he's just trying to feed his dog, and he cut me off. That man is not the point. It's not a personal matter. The idea of living on the road itself is chaotic. By definition, keeping each other on our toes is the best thing we can do. I'm keeping an eye on the man. Really. Simply put, you couldn't comprehend. Crow was the outcome. Was a walking paradox that was full of contradictions. He would go right if he said left. If you understand what I mean. All of a sudden, the profundity of our conversation seemed untrue. It seemed as though everything he said was unexpected. I saw his legs twitching with restlessness. As we conversed, his hands began to shake and he grew increasingly agitated, smoking a chain of cigarettes. Right now, I have to purchase some. He stated, more smokes. He said as the sun rose, at 1 o'clock. Was beginning to fall. To be honest, nobody cared, thus nobody replied. There was nothing inside, and it was close to 5 o'clock. We won't encounter a shop or a service station until we reach the city's outskirts, and that's where we'll be pulling off. For the evening. Hey, let's get off so I can buy some smokes. According to Jackson, there aren't any petrol stations for 90 miles in any direction. Looking around, I saw a bunch of losers getting shot back and given the full barrel slap ever since the automobile went off the road and onto the shoulder, which he fixed earlier in the year. Returned us to the roadway. At this time, I took immediate action since, as I mentioned before, everyone is my best buddy. I threw open the door with a shout and did my best to bind his arms. Although he was a little run, he was honestly wired. We adjusted the visible muscle. I occasionally feel his legs and arms rippling beneath me, looking for a point of weakness. I attempted to convey to you why you shouldn't do anything similar again, dude. I'm going to force open this door and allow you to speed at roughly 80 miles per hour on the highway. You're prepared to apply a coat of paint. Cars are passing through. Yeah, dude, we're okay. It's okay, he said. I could still feel his fingers searching, though. I didn't take my hand off the door handle out. Things started to calm down. For the latter part of the drive, we just sat silently while they asked us again about our trip, trying to act normal and offer recommendations for places to visit. But suddenly, nobody was paying attention. We sort of conversed with each other and concentrate on the music. You simply leaned against the glass and gazed out at the desert that was going by. After some while, a gas station was seen. The city's initial indications. We had reserved a hotel room in advance. Our folks are waiting for us and was aware of our precise location. Proceeding. "Hey, look, let's quit smoking cigarettes," the young man inquired. Indeed, it was said. We all backed off the highway and drove in, a little taken aback. The car park. "In a minute. Do any of you people have any desires?" I gave a head shake. "Check to see if you got them." "Whom?" "The drink with chocolate," Ever said. "He's never even drunk on you, in my experience. His whole existence." Or gave a nod before heading to the shop. "What are your thoughts, guys?" "Ever say, let's leave him here?" Secondly, the man had left. "Of the shot you took?" "Yes, this guy is one weird guy." "It's time to leave," Jackson said emphatically. Startled, I cast a glance out the window. Are we going to carry that out? Just burn this place down and leave this guy all alone? But then I realized that he was trained from the start. He was and will always be adrift. We fulfilled our share and delivered him to his next location, the city where he was meant to be staying at the hospital. Go see his pal. Yes, I did say. Before he discovers us, let's head to the hotel. Maybe we even stopped at the red light to make sure we were far enough down the road or we just burned out of there like it was Grand Theft Auto. Time Croy exited that convenience store. The last item we required was. He was driving us along the street. We didn't notice until we were a mile or two away that his duffel bag was still with us. I felt it to my stomach, foul as I gazed down. After pulling it over, I placed it on the seat beside me. It had a damp feeling. Wet. In addition to being heavy, it had a mildewy stench. Even worse. I said, "Hey, we got Crohn's stuff back here. Are you telling the truth? Could you have thrown it out in the parking lot instead?" Jackson inquired. "I'm not sure." I failed to notice it. Ever turned around and hit his blinker right away. "But I'm willing to let go of this guy." He clarified, "I'm not stealing his stuff." Hugh Jackson got into a little argument. I simply unwinded in the rear. This whole mess was beyond my control. That day, we had spent over 9 hours in the automobile. All I wanted was to lie in a bed. As long as we didn't let that dude back in the automobile, I didn't mind whatever they chose. He was a really strange man. Then it hit me, I could go through stuff like this with no repercussions. I find more questions than answers as I unzipped the bag. The first action I took was, I could see all the panties. About 20 pairs of women's underwear were there. I was unable to determine if they were clean. They appeared to be in a wide range of sizes, therefore I'm going to assume they were stolen. A book written by Albert Camus once included a partially formed sheet of acid. Additionally, a bag will appear. To obtain this and be cocaine. An entire pack of smokes. Why did he wish for us to stop? Past us. There's also a little more eerie content. A large combat knife, a single change of what appeared to be regular clothes, and a real pair of metal handcuffs with a little key were present. I only went so far as to say that. We were returning to the petrol station, and I could tell that everything was disgusting. I told them what I had discovered, and they all began to feel a little anxious. However, brave Chloe was standing against the building, smoking a cigarette, waiting for us as we pulled in. As if we had discovered him sooner. Ever throw the bag out the window and roll through the lot. After giving us the finger, Croy let us resume our journey towards the hotel. I had a nice rest of the night. Standard. We had dinner at a hip pizzeria a few blocks away. He even came across an arcade and returned to the lodging to collapse. To keep the automobile off the street and out of sight, we parked around back for anyone passing by. However, I woke up earlier than Jackson the following morning and never managed to get myself together. I discovered that my toilet bag was left in the car. After putting on my shoes, I stepped outside to see cigarette butts all over the ground and a stack of papers tucked under the windshield. When IG arrived at the car, the book in Crone's bag had its pages removed. I could tell that Corey had discovered our automobile and spent the entire night lounging in it, along with an ancient French philosophy book. I have no idea if he was holding out for us or merely desired to produce a point, perhaps, but that morning it got to us. I was positive he was lurking someplace, ready to emerge, grab our attention. Guards straightened up and practically skipped down. At that time, we were all pretty worried. This guy was fortunate to be familiar with the city. All we had to work with were printouts of Google Maps. Luckily, we never saw him again. Once more. For the remainder of that trip, though, you better know we were alert.